Hello, good evening. I'm Karen Taylor. I am Program Director of the General Society of Mechanics and Tradesmen, and I'm very pleased to welcome you to this literature talk and to the Labour, Literature and Landmark Lecture Series. Tonight's program is a particular pleasure to me. I used to have, as some of you may know, I used to have a different role at the General Society as director of the New York Center for Independent Publishing. So I can say what a great pleasure it is this evening to welcome back an independent press to the General Society. The Labour, Literature and Landmark Lectures are supported in part by public funds from the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs in partnership with the City Council. And for those of you who may be less familiar with the General Society, a brief introduction. The General Society of Mechanics and Tradesmen of the City of New York was first founded in 1785. And in fact, this is the 5th building the Society has had in its long life. It was founded by 22 skilled craftsmen. And today, this 228-year-old organization continues to serve and improve the quality of life of the people of the City of New York through its educational, philanthropic, and cultural programs. These include its tuition-free Mechanics Institute, a school for the trades, this General Society library, and this nearly 200-year-old lecture series, of which, of course, tonight is part of. Before introducing our program this evening, I want to remind you that there will be a short wine and cheese reception after tonight's event, which we hope you can stay for. Now, I just want to give you sort of a brief overview of Pegasus Books. It really is quite the success story. It's one of the fastest growing independent publishing companies in the country. It's dedicated to the aim of independent publishing that stimulates both the intellect and the imagination. The press was founded in 2006 by publisher Claiborne Hancock. And tonight's panel discussion will feature Pegasus Books Associate Publisher Jessica Case, who's right beside me, Marketing Director and Senior Editor Iris Blasi, who's there, and the two writers, first of all, Bill Morris, sorry, out of sequence, I beg your pardon, and Parnell Hall. Even in a challenging economic market, Pegasus Books has been able to thrive, yielding 128% increase in print and book sales since 2011, publishing a diverse catalog of works that include history, philosophy, biography, and memoir, literary fiction, and noir titles. The discussion tonight will just incorporate some of these topics. It will include an insider's perspective, of course, on independent publishing. The panel will discuss the company's history, its philosophy, its many successful and critically acclaimed books, its digital development, and the realities of being an independent publisher. And as I've mentioned, Parnell Hall and Bill Morris are two writers published with Pegasus. They will talk about their path to publishing and possibly read some extracts from their books. So to kick off tonight's discussion, I'm very pleased to introduce to you Associate Publisher Jessica Case.
So just to refresh, I'll start off, I'll give you a bit of an overview about Pegasus and kind of what my own understanding of our place in kind of today's world marketplace as an independent publisher. Pegasus was founded in 2005, and our first book came out in April of 2006. We are wholly independent, and it's just the thrill and the terror that comes with all of that. I don't know how many of you have been following the kind of ongoing dispute between Hachette, which is one of the large corporate publishers, versus Amazon that's kind of been dominating the news headlines as of late. And there has always been kind of a interesting interplay between corporate publishing and the independent scene. Obviously, we're all trying to sell great books, establish great writers, cut through all the noise that's out there, that distracts people from reading wonderful books. But as an independent, one thing that Pegasus's publisher, Claiborne Hancock, and I really value is our editorial flexibility and the fact that we can be nimble. When we first started Pegasus, in 2006, there were no ebooks yet, and it was just before the crash of 2008, so probably not the best time to be launching a company, but then I suppose there's never really a good time to start an independent press. And one of the things that we found very exciting was that we were able to jump on the digital revolution very quickly. All of our books are in ebook, and it's been exciting to see how different genres respond to different formats. At first glance, you might think that a mystery or a crime novel would be kind of our first ebook bestseller, but lo and behold, it was actually a very heavy history book about the Norman Conquest that was our first ebook bestseller. So just when you think you know everything, there's still a lot to learn. One of the great things about being an independent, I think in today's marketplace, is we're able to find really exciting writers. We get a lot of writers that maybe, don't stand out on a big corporate publisher's list. They're not the James Pattersons or the J.K. Rowlings, but they're still a tremendous and exciting talent, and they deserve to have their works out there for people to read. And an independent house like Pegasus, we can really read the submissions quickly and act on it. And then another exciting thing is it can kind of respond to our own editorial interests and flexibilities, books that we think are important. I personally will acquire some literary fiction, some popular science. Bill's novel is a novel about Detroit. We just finished our editorial process together, which was very exciting. So it's great to kind of keep my interests fresh. Just after I finish up a crime novel, it's maybe really exciting to work on a book about dinosaurs and then go into a novel about wine. So it's refreshing for me and keeps my interests high. Karen was very kind to mention our great growth, which has been due to a number of factors. I think part of it was just we've grown the list exponentially. In the beginning, when the company first started, it was just trying to get the whole thing off the ground, get our names known amongst libraries, amongst bookstores, amongst critics. It's a big factor. You got to get the media to cover your books. And then once we kind of found our footing there, we were really able to grow the list. That's helped. We're getting more and more reviews, national coverage for a lot of our writers, reviews in the New York Times, bookings on the Today Show, better known with BNN, kind of navigating the Amazon system. Love them or hate them, we got to do business with them. So it's always kind of finessing that relationship and making sure that contract terms are acceptable to everyone. And it's just, I mentioned Amazon, I might segue into Iris Blasi, who we poached away from an ebook company very happily. We poached her away to kind of manage our growing digital presence, and she's worked for a lot of different companies over the years, so I'm sure she's found working for Pegasus, a bit of a trial by fire. We all wear a lot of different hats. On any given day, you can be editor, publicist, office lease negotiator to the stars, whatever kind of the demands of the job bring. So she's hopefully enjoyed her time thus far, and she's been a great asset to our team as we've kind of embraced the challenges of publishing in two formats simultaneously, our hardcover and our paperbacks, and then of course our ebooks.
Thanks. Those are very nice things. To say, I was obviously thrilled to be poached and very happy to be at Pegasus. I've been here for just under a year, and this is the first independent house that I've worked for. I started my career, I worked as a publishing consultant and did some work with a literary agency. I worked in editorial at Random House and at Sterling Publishing, which is the publishing company that's owned by Barnes & Noble. I worked for a literary PR company, and then directly before this I worked for an ebook publisher where I worked with the Pegasus Books and decided that I liked them so much I should just come over and work for Pegasus full-time. And it's a fascinating experience working for an independent publisher and for Pegasus in particular. As Jessica said, the market is incredibly challenging for everybody right now, and it will be interesting to see how things play out. The situation that's occurring presently between Hachette and Amazon will have far-reaching repercussions for the rest of the industry and what our contract terms look like, and I'm glad we're not at the forefront of that battle, quite frankly, but it will certainly be interesting to see what the diversity of the publishing world looks like going forward. But Pegasus has been an interesting place to have been. I think what sort of personifies it in a great way is when I first started working for Claiborne, I was thrilled to have this dual role where I work both as the marketing director and as senior editor, because I feel like uses, as Jessica said, we all wear a lot of many hats, and it uses the sorts of different things that I've learned in the past. But when I was talking to Jessica and Claiborne about, what I wanted to acquire and what they were looking for, and, seeing if they had any particular areas that they wanted me to be seeking new material to publish in, Claiborne said, I just want you to buy books that you love. And it's that kind of spirit is what predominates, like, almost everything that we do. It's really remarkable to be at a company where I truly believe in all of the books. There's not, one side product that kind of just ends up with nobody behind it. We're really all hands on deck all the time. As Jessica said, whether we're doing marketing things, publicity, editorial work, calling the printer, dealing with shipping, packing things up and messengering things, like, we all at our various levels do all of those roles. And I think, I think it's important to, as we move into the digital world, to think about the ebooks and what's available on what platform, and also simultaneously just a digital presence for a company. One of the things that we've done recently was we've revamped our website, because it's just increasingly important to be out there, but to be present, to allow readers to purchase books however they want, wherever they want. Obviously, we believe in independent bookstores. We have a very strong library market. But if somebody wants to read a book on their Kindle, that's great. If somebody is a dedicated hardcover reader, that's fantastic. We just want to do whatever we can in an increasingly noisy world to get our products in front of them. I think, back in 10 and 15 years ago, the old adage used to be that somebody needs to see a product 6 times before they'll make a purchase. So, they would see a New York Times book review, they would see an ad that ran in print someplace, they would hear about it from a friend, and they would walk into a bookstore and see it on a front table and decide to make that purchase. And as we live in a world that is increasingly dominated by digital noise, I think, people need to start seeing things 15 and 20 times before it kind of sinks in. So it's important for us to have a larger web presence. We support our authors who are engaged in social media. We're doing that as well. And again, across platforms, we're active mostly on Twitter and Facebook, and we also have an active Tumblr following, and we're working on Pinterest and Instagram and all those kinds of things, just to kind of get the word out about our books however we can.
Yeah, so I guess, to circle back to that, another thing we also try to do to kind of balance out our great digital initiative is to make, I'm thinking of being in this beautiful building and being mechanics and tradesmen, but we also try to make sure we have a very beautiful product. Whether it's a perfectly produced ebook or a beautiful hardcover with a nice jacket, good quality paper, a nice finish. I've noticed more and more that the quality of hardcover books being put out in the marketplace today, not just Pegasus's, which of course are the best of the best, but any other publisher, they make a very concerted effort to preserve the quality of the printed book itself. I think the past couple years, print was crashing, ebooks were rising across the entire industry, but for the past 2 or 3 years, I was told by someone at Publishers Weekly who had kind of talked with all the major houses, those 2 formats for the past 2 years have really plateaued. So people have kind of settled on a device that they like. So as Iris was saying, again, it's our job to make sure that no matter what device or what kind of book people want to read, that our product is top-notch with attractive cover design, beautiful typesetting, nice silk matte finish or glossy finish on the jacket, anything that makes the product tactile or exciting to a person in a bookstore to kind of cut through all that noise. And the hand selling of librarians and independent bookstore people or bloggers, again, just trying to cut through all the noise, getting people to put down the Kardashian show or whatever it is people are doing these days and, pick up a book is something that we really strive for our writers. So next I'll introduce Parnell Hall, who is an interesting, who is actually one of our oldest authors on our list.
In fact, when the first book was written, I held the stylus.
Yeah, I should qualify that. He was one of the first writers that we ever published. So you are now, his 4th book is going to be published this, we just got the galley proofs in today, so that will be his 4th book with us. His 3rd book with Pegasus is for sale, but we've really grown since we've started with Parnell all these years, so it's been a real pleasure to work with him. He has a fantastic, one-of-a-kind series featuring a very unique PI, and we're thrilled to have him in our Pegasus family.
Yeah, I write the Stanley Hastings Private Eye series, which Pegasus is publishing. I also write the Puzzle Lady Crossword Puzzle Mysteries. I also write the Steve Winslow courtroom dramas. I've written 40 books, a dozen short stories. I've been doing this for a while. As Jessica alluded to, I'd like to read you something just briefly, give you an idea. The neurotic hero and the laconic cop, cast as his foil, periodically rattle off the points of the case in perfectly timed patter routines, just like top bananas in some frenetic stage farce. What Mr. Hall does to the private eye formula is very funny, but it isn't frivolous. His puzzles, for all their manic nonsense, are fiendish constructions of sound logic. Now, if you're an author and you get that review in your small town local paper, you're ecstatic. This is from the book review section of the New York Times. And when I got it, I was not happy at all. At the time, I was being published by Warner Books, and they had just dropped my series, because they had already done 6 books in the series, and if you haven't broken out by then, you're through. And this is the way it is with the major houses. Now, were it not for Pegasus, my books would not be published now. They are willing to pick up an author who has a track record that doesn't say bestseller list, publish their books, and keep them in print. Because of them, Stanley Hastings. This is the 19th book in the series now. And this is one of the values of the small publishing press. Pegasus also does it very well. When I got my first contract with them, I was in Murder by the Book in Houston, and David Thompson, who, God rest his soul, said to me, when he heard I was with Pegasus, he said, "Oh, they're fantastic. Let me show you one of their books. They do a really class act job. They do this, they do this, they do this. You're in good hands." They do a class act job, and they've also gotten me reviewed by the New York Times. For a small house, this is incredible. So what they are doing for me and for other established writers like me who could not continue because the houses are all, they're eating each other up. There used to be 12, now there are 4, soon there will be Amazon. And this is the way that authors keep going. And I'm very pleased to be at Pegasus.
Thank you, Parnell. That's very sweet.
40 books.
Yeah.
Whoa. I have a similar story, I guess. I published my first novel back in 1992 with Knopf, a very prestigious house. Had a great editor named Gary Fisketjohn, kind of a legendary guy. Excuse me, he did a great job of line editing this manuscript, and I was just blown away. Well, he didn't buy my second book, but Avon did. And that was 1997, 5 years later. And then I just kind of disappeared for 17 years. And I was sent back to Detroit, where I grew up, in January of 2012 by Popular Mechanics magazine. They were doing this big series on the rebirth of Detroit. This was shortly before the bankruptcy. And I went back feeling very dubious, and I really was scared. I was on that airplane, I was thinking, oh man, they're asking me to go back there and write about the fact that Detroit's going to come back from the dead. What if I get there and it's just nonsense? And I was really very, very nervous. Well, I got on the ground, spent about 2 weeks there, nonstop interviewing people all day, every day. And I thought, this city's more incredible than it was when I was growing up, when it was booming. My dad worked at Ford Motor for 17 years back in the 50s and 60s. And I thought, wow, there's really something happening in this city that's very vital and very interesting and very dark and just fascinating. Well, this book had been through 3 agents. It had been through 4 titles. It had been through, I'm going to say, a dozen drafts and probably conservatively 30 or 40 rejections. And I met an agent one night at the National Book Awards named Alice Martell, and I introduced myself, and I was interviewing one of her clients. And a couple of months after I got back from Detroit, I thought, I'm going to call Alice Martell up and see if she'd like to take a look at this dead book in the bottom of my drawer that's been sitting there for 17 years. She said, Bill, I really liked what you wrote about my client. I'd love to take a look. I sent it to her. A week later, she calls me back and says, I love this book. I'm going to sell it. I said, let's go. So she sent it out to 17 publishers, and the rejections started coming, and I was like, oh boy, here we go. Oh man, not again. And then one day she called and said, Pegasus is buying your book. And I'll never forget it. I was so stunned, I couldn't talk, and I'm kind of a voluble guy. I was dumbstruck. And the book is going to be out in a couple of weeks, and I echo Parnell here because I mentioned that editing experience I had with Gary Fisketjon at McAuliffe, and what Jessica did with the manuscript was even more impressive to me. The care, the thoughtfulness, the smarts that went into the editing of it. This is stuff that writers, they just value so much, and everybody tells you that nobody edits books anymore, and I'm happy to be able to say that's not true. And then after Jessica went through the book very, very closely, the copy editor, who was that? What was her?
Phil.
No,
And Deb.
Yeah, Deb, and then then a proofreader went through it. He caught things I wouldn't have even dreamed of, like the numbers of hotel rooms. The guy's walking down to a murder scene. And he says, well, if this guy's going this way and the odd numbers are on one side and the numbers should be going down. And I'm like, wow, you're right. I hadn't even thought of that, And it sounds like a small thing, but these things add up. In fiction, the God is in the details. And if there's little things wrong, that's going to add up and you're going to lose your reader. And so I can't, again, to echo Parnell, I can't thank the crew at Pegasus enough because like my agent said, they put a lot of love into what they're doing, and I think that shows in I think this is a beautiful, physically beautiful book, and it's well made in the sense of the pages and the paper and the ink but more than that, the editing and the care that went into it. So I'm on cloud nine. I'm getting ready to go out on a little publicity tour and head down south and up to Detroit, and after 17 years of spinning my wheels, writing 3 novels, 2 proposals for books, a screenplay, and a whole lot of journalism. Finally, I got another book coming out, so I'm probably the happiest guy in the world. So, and I thank Claiborne and Jessica and the whole crew at Pegasus for making this happen. Have I answered any questions?
Yeah.
I've just been yakking, but anyhow, that's my story.
Yeah, so I guess we hope the future is bright for Pegasus. There's always kind of ups and downs in independent publishing, just kind of with the different, expansions and contractions in the market. With borders closing, that was very hard a couple years ago. And obviously there's this new precedent to be set with Amazon, but I think the future is bright. We value talented writers. It's first and foremost, it's always what's between the pages that makes a book. And I think the fact that we have a very devoted team, we have writers that are also very devoted to their books. I think the days of a writer just writing and sitting in their house in Vermont, crafting their beautiful words is great, but it's not the way the modern world works. I think we need authors like Parnell and Bill who are out there. They connect with other authors, they connect with the literary scene, they want to connect with their readers. I think that's so valuable, especially for a place like Pegasus. We need writers like you guys to be all hands on deck as well, and we really value that and appreciate that. And it'll be exciting to see what the future brings. So if anybody has any questions or so that is, funnily enough, the one thing that we never have trouble with. We get a lot of submissions. I would say maybe 50 a week, maybe more, maybe less, depending, but it's consistent. And it obviously spans a wide range of genres. Most of our submissions do tend to be agented. That's not to say we haven't gotten writers from like the quote-unquote slush pile before, but most of our submissions are agented. So we'll read them and evaluate them accordingly, both from our kind of editorial standards, but also what we think we can publish successfully. There's certain things we just don't publish. We don't publish romance, we don't publish any YA, we don't publish prescriptive nonfiction, no self-help. So that kind of weeds the pile a little bit. And then, we just kind of make a lot of kind of hard decisions about the author's platform, marketability, what we think we can conceivably sell, do the profit and loss, and then if all works out accordingly, we make an offer. So.
Could I ask if you wait till the mic comes?
Do you turn any of your books into Audible books?
We do. Did I just turn your mic off? Whoop. Hello? Okay, there we go. We do. We will sublicense out our audio rights. It is a sub-rights sale, so we don't produce our own audiobooks. We'll license it out to Audible or Blackstone or Highbridge Audio, one of the major audio houses out there. So I would say a solid majority of our books go into audio. Maybe not everyone, not every book is right for audio, but a lot of them.
Thank you. What's the difference between an e-book and a print-on-demand book?
So an e-book is just electronic, and a print-on-demand is something that we do a little bit for our backlist books. I guess I should. So if we're launching a book like Bill's or Parnell's, we will do a large-scale print run, and that goes to our warehouse out in Scranton. And then as the orders come in from libraries and stores, they'll ship out. As the life of the book wanes, maybe a book is 7 years old, we'll still probably sell like 20 books a year. It's not quite enough for us to go back to press for a large-scale print run and meet our margins. The unit cost is too prohibitive, but obviously we still want to fulfill those 20 orders. So there are certain companies that do print on demand, and they will actually print to order. And it's a nice new thing that's not always been around in publishing. So a little different than ebook, but it's a way to kind of print very small quantities of books as the orders come in from certain stores. So.
Do you think that there will always be physical books? Do you see physical books as always being part of Pegasus Books' future?
I think so. I don't know. The death of print has been something, kind of headlines have always been calling for years, and not since even the birth of ebooks. I think when the internet first started, everyone's like, oh, is this the end of print? I just think it'll change and it'll be different, but I think print books will always be with us. I don't know about you guys, but I look at a screen all day, and I actually like to go home and look at something different. And that's not saying I don't have an iPad and a whole set of, tech toys, but, sometimes I really just prefer to read print, so.
I think it's interesting. I totally agree. I think that print books are here to stay. I think that the market is changing. But I also think that ebooks currently are print books that are poured into an electronic format. And we're not doing the kinds of innovations that utilize the digital format. So it will be interesting to see if there are things that happen with hyperlinking inside of a book, or expanding, that books don't need to be linear anymore if you're not bound between, two covers. That I think that there will be innovation. We're still very, very early into the advent of the technology. It's interesting too when you look back at sort of the history of the e-reader, and just in the last 10 years when Sony was really probably the first large digital reader. You had to plug it into your computer to upload it, and everybody in publishing got them because it was going to revolutionize the submission process, and we didn't have to drag home our tote bags full of manuscripts anymore. But it was such a pain to have to physically connect it to your computer and then do that upload that people weren't really using them. And so the Kindle WhisperNet technology, where you could get the book from the ether and not be connected to anything, really was the game changer that made that device be successful. And I think that we're going to start to see, in terms of the content itself, those sorts of leaps and bounds of people being a little bit more experimental with regards to social reading, with regards to marginalia, digital marginalia, and markup. When you look back at the history of the book, it's not like Gutenberg printed the Bible and they were like, this is it, and it's all perfect. Books existed, and they used to not have title pages, and they used to just, the format took a while to happen. So we're so early in the infancy of the ebook that I think it's going to be very interesting to see what happens in the next 10 or 15 years.
I certainly hope they do. I have one book that exists only as an ebook because I got my backlist back and put it online, and I had one book that never got published because I had left the publisher. I had several publishers, and he was so angry with me for leaving the other series that he offered me so little money for the manuscript I'd written that I refused publication. And it sat in the box for 15 years until I got, started publishing my own ebooks. And I put The Innocent Woman is now an ebook that people buy just as if it were a book, but it doesn't exist. I mean, it exists only as an ebook. There's no such, you can't hold it in your hand. There's no print on demand. It's just a file.
Yeah.
I think people buy too, sorry not to keep on talking about this, but I think people have different connections with what like the book product means to them. I don't know if anybody here read The Goldfinch, which is one of my favorite books of last year. Incredible. I own that book. I have the galley that I got from the publisher. I have the ebook that I bought just to have it because I loved it and I wanted to be able to look up things when I wanted to reference certain lines. And then I also went to an event with the author, so I bought the hardcover and had her sign it. So I think that all three of those different products mean so much to me, and there are some cases where I want to buy a beautiful 500-pound book and have that be something that lives on my bookshelf, but then also too, you're like, I don't really want to have that 500-page hardcover in my bag all the time. So I think that, it's that flexibility. Like Jessica said, we were surprised with the Norman Conquest being our first ebook bestseller that hit the Wall Street Journal and USA Today bestseller list. But it's been interesting with some of our books. Sometimes a high price point can be the reason why somebody buys a book in just because it's a little bit cheaper. Sometimes people will buy something in an electronic format, again, because of the page count. But it just, it's very difficult, too, to give an ebook as a gift. I think that is something that might change going forward, but I mean, everybody wants to be able to open something, and a book is a wonderful gift because it's so easy to wrap.
I remember I was reading Bennett Cerf's memoir at Random. He was the founder of Random House, and when he founded Random House, back in the mid-20th century, maybe even just before, it was right when the Paperback Revolution was kind of taking place. Back then there were no paperbacks, and my God, like reading it, you would have thought that, the uproar that it caused to not have like these hardbound, leather-bound books. They were going to have like this disposable crazy talk, buying in the train station the books, you would have thought that, it made me feel good that I was like, man, the industry is actually handling like the digital revolution pretty well, because when paperbacks were first introduced, publishers just went crazy because it was like disrupting their margins, and how are we going to deal with this new format, this disposable format? Now like the common people can buy books at this cheap price. It's just talking crazy. So it was really kind of interesting to see that the industry's actually weathered something like this once before. It may seem silly to us now, but kind of format changes are always kind of surprising, I think. So.
I have a question. The authors were talking about their books, and they never gave us their titles or showed them like you would if you were blogging them.
Mine is called Motor City Burning, which I don't know if you know John Lee Hooker. He wrote a great song called The Motor City is Burning. And I'll tell you how this title came about so quickly. I'd mentioned that the book had had several titles in its path to publication, and the working title that I had when I sold the book to Jessica was Vic #sign 43. And I had been operating under the influence of Elmore Leonard, and I just read his book, Unknown Man #89, and I thought that had a nice Detroit crime sound to it. And 43 people died during the riot. The novel is set during the summer of 1967, and then this following summer of 1968. So Jessica bought the book, and she said, it's a great title, but it's just a little bit too crimey, crimey, there's a good word. Yeah. And I said, okay. And then I said, well, I've always loved that John Lee Hooker song. And then I said to my partner, I said, the Motor City is burning. And she said, no. Motor City Burning. And it clicked. You know how titles should click in your head, I think. You go, they're either right or they're not. And I said, yes. And Jessica agreed, and here we are. So that's how that came about.
Yeah, my book is called Stakeout, and this is a private eye in New York City on a stakeout, and it's of a more hard-boiled nature than Safari. Same private eye, But now he's in Africa with his wife on safari, and the book is written like a cozy. Where I get my titles, I belong to the Word of the Month Club.
Yeah, all of Parnell's books have one word. The first book was Hitman, then Caper. So I like them though. Clean, punchy, easy to search for.
Hashtagable.
Yeah.
I have two questions. One is whether you publish nonfiction, and I guess you do, what type that is, and also what is the average page length or word count of your books?
So we do publish nonfiction. About half of our list is nonfiction: history, biography, popular science, music, kind of a wide range of stuff. And length varies. Some of our nonfiction hardcovers will be on the short side, 200 to 250 pages, but then we did a big book about the Brontes that was 1,000 pages. So it's a wide range, depending on the subject matter.
Do you publish children's books?
I'm sorry, what?
Do you publish children's books?
No children's books. I wish. Especially YA is a really growing marketplace, but stick with what we know.
We don't publish YA, but we do have some titles that have crossover potential. The first novel that I actually acquired that'll be out in March of 2015 is a book about a freshman in college who is a boy who is dealing with his sexuality and experimenting with cross-dressing and sort of trying to figure out his identity and his sexuality and all these kinds of things. So the book is about his relationship with a therapist. It's called The Listener, and it's about both of them, but because they're such a strong young character that we think that there might be a little bit more advanced readers in high school that this might appeal to, and so that there are some things that we'll do in terms of marketing and positioning that book to make sure that that's available to that kind of audience.
Yeah, I guess, yeah. We've had another book that's crossed over nicely. It was about a middle school age piano prodigy who survived World War II by hiding in the spotlight and performing the whole time while disguising the fact that she was Jewish. And it's definitely a very adult book about some pretty dark themes, but it was actually the subject of a middle school writing contest for the state of Virginia because the girl was about the age of a 7th or 8th grader. But so crossovers are great, but as far as illustrated children's books, that's just not something we specialize in.
What is the ratio between established writers and the unpublished?
Maybe half and half, give or take. Every list is different. We definitely are not opposed to debuts. It's exciting. But then obviously we have some writers with established track records as well, so it just kind of depends. Track records can be a blessing or a curse, depending on what the track record may be. So yeah, we are not opposed to taking a risk though on a new name.
We need a vamper in between the microphone.
That's where you're
Bum,
gonna
bum, 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 ba, da, 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 da.
Yeah, hi. You mentioned that you like authors with a platform. I'd like you to explain what a platform is and whether you would take an author who doesn't have one, whatever it is. Thank you.
So I guess that term platform is kind of something that does get bandied around a lot. I'll start maybe with nonfiction because that's perhaps easier to illustrate. So if I was taking on a nonfiction book, I would look at maybe where they're a university professor, have they written papers or have other connections to different journalists, they've worked in, television or produced a documentary about whatever the book is on. Those are some connections that we can parlay, people that they know. Most writers have day jobs. What is that day job? How can we parlay that into something, to help market the book. On the fiction, it's a little bit more difficult because there's not kind of the straight and narrow, oh, you wrote a book about nuclear energy, you're a nuclear engineer, there's the natural fit, that's your platform. Fiction, it can be something as amorphous as social media presence, which is very important. The author likes putting themselves out there to kind of engage with readers and get out there. Bill is doing a tour. He's actually getting in a car, an old vintage kind of American muscle car, and driving around and going to bookstores. Parnell is very active with the Mystery Writers of America. That's very important, kind of meeting with reading groups and librarians, knowing that the author is willing to get out there and work a little bit. Of course, like the greatest platform is like, oh, I published a novel before and I have all these people who know who I am and it's sold this many and these are all my great reviews. That's the ultimate platform or precedent. It's just, as Iris mentioned, it's a noisy world out there. So again, like whatever else the author can bring to the table besides their beautiful words is something that will always kind of be a deciding factor into whether or not we can launch a novel successfully.
I would say that if there's one permanent change that's happened in the industry over the course of the last decade or so, it's that the days of the reclusive author are over. That you definitely do need to work with an author who will be willing to play ball. And again, sometimes they do come to the table with a very large social media presence and a huge email list from their previous things and a built-in fan base and lots of amazing connections that they can send it, to their media friends, and all that stuff is great. But secondarily, in terms of platform, we're also just looking for somebody who's willing to participate in and do things that are asked of them. So whether, that's going on a tour, whether that's making themselves available for TV or radio interviews, whether it's contributing pieces, I think that both for fiction and nonfiction, people do care about the person behind the book, and that there are ways to talk about the book product without saying, buy my book, buy my book, buy my book over and over. There's, are ways of introducing that into the conversation. We had one author who had written a literary debut that was published by Random House and then came to us with his first thriller. His mother had passed away, like, right when his first book came out, and he said that having been a lifelong reader, he spent a couple months not reading anything, which was just part of his grieving process. And then he wound up in a hotel and discovered Stephen King for the first time. And it kind of turned him on to crime and thrillers and psychological thrillers in a way that he had never experienced before. So he wrote a very beautiful piece for that was published in a large literary outlet. So there are things like that there are ways to talk about it, or write a guest piece. We do a lot of things where we ask our authors to say, here are my top 5 favorite books on something, because that's just an interesting way of talking about books and things that people are interested in, and then simultaneously drawing attention to yourself and what it is that you're trying to sell.
I have music videos on YouTube. Seriously.
Yeah. He's
Check
the
me
ultimate
out.
chameleon.
Put in Parnell Hall. There's a whole bunch of them. One of them got picked up by the Huffington Post and went viral.
Yeah. Chameleon.
We like it when authors do things that go viral.
Yes, exactly. Anybody else?
What is the normal time frame between when you decide to buy a book and when it's ultimately published?
I would say from when we sign the contract, well, it depends on whether or not the book has been written. Sometimes we will buy a book on proposal for nonfiction. So then, there's factor time in, they have to write the book. Then when it's delivered, I would say probably then about a year, just giving us that, because there is a bit of a lead time. We have to catalog the book. Our sales team has to go out and get advance orders and start pitching the books to the different accounts. Then we have to factor in the printing time, getting it into the warehouse, and the warehouse has to ship it out. So I would say probably about a year, maybe even more, soup to nuts, from when I actually have the final manuscript ready to go. Sometimes it's a little tighter, but then that's just more stressful for everyone involved. So,
Was the Albany BoucherCon last year?
In the fall.
yeah.
Yeah. Last fall, Albany BoucherCon, I remember the date. I asked Claiborne if he wanted another Stanley Hastings book. Here it is. So,
Yeah.
That was October?
yeah.
Yeah.
So it'll be published very soon.
And it'll be out this fall.
Yeah, so yeah,
So
literally a year. Exactly, nice and tidy.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed your presentation. I wanted to make a little comment about your conflict between the e-book and the printed book world, maybe on a larger historical fact that, for instance, when the Jacquard loom was introduced and the Luddites revolted because it was perceived that the technology was going to do away with manual labor. This is a favorite topic of mine. Being a technician, I'm in the tech world, and I see this on many different sides. In fact, historically, I think the opposite has happened. Technology has created a tremendous amount of work on many different levels. So at first, there's kind of this shock of the new technology, which changes the balance and the way things happen. But eventually the two things kind of augment each other and can complement each other, and the whole center of gravity kind of changes, and they can really enhance each other in the long run. I'd say maybe perhaps the exception would be with the music business, partly because of the nature of the medium, and there was technological advantages with compressing files and being able to shoot music around on the internet, which was a new thing that was more dramatic in that sense and lent itself more towards the music business and changed the record industry more dramatically that way. But with books, I think it's kind of different. I mean, I like to just have a book with me sometimes physically, and I go back to it and you can flip through it, and there's something simple and, you know, so perfect and historically, you know, magnificent about what a book is in its physical sense, that it's just too great. You just can't walk away from it. I mean, look at where we're sitting in this room, and it's astounding. I mean, so thank you again very much. I appreciate it.
I do have an association with small presses. What's your opinion or affiliation with them?
Nothing formal. You know, we're part of the Association of American Publishers, but that encompasses all stripes of people. I suppose there's a sense of informal solidarity amongst the independents, but you know, nothing official. Our distributor is W.W. Norton, who is the greatest, arguably the greatest independent publisher there is. They've been around for 90 years, and they just publish an incredible amount of things. So when we signed on to work with them with distribution, which means we use their sales team in their warehouse. You know, I always said whatever Kool-Aid they're drinking, you know, I want to drink it too, because they've, you know, just really thrived and stayed true to themselves and their editorial vision. They're entirely employee-owned and operated. So they're someone that personally I think Claiborne and I really admire as to what an independent can achieve, but nothing formal, no.
Do you have graphic designers, illustrators, photographers on staff? Do you practice the art, I guess, of trying to create books the way they historically were created, and looking at the, you know, margins and and the headers and footers, and also, I mean, are you using the classic typefaces or digitized typefaces? You know, in other words, you know, Palatino's, you know,
yeah. So we
digitized ripoff is.
So we have one woman, Maria, who handles our interior design and our typesetting. So she'll design every book, every layout. You know, in particular, help us with our photo layouts. If it's a nonfiction book, we'll do a photo insert, and she'll work to lay that out. And then we have a couple cover designers, one fellow who does, I would say, 90% of our list, and then we'll, you know, have a couple other freelancers that design for us. But I've told this to other people before, but I would say, like, every day in my mind, I was like, what can I do to make sure Mike and Maria are happy? Because I'd hate for them one day to be like, you guys are making me crazy, and they would run out. So yeah, good design talent is incredibly valuable.
But no, I mean, for the most part, we don't have a photographer and illustrator on staff. I mean, the vast majority of our books are unillustrated.
Yeah.
There are some of them that have illustrations throughout, but mostly we'll do an insert, and that comes from material that we've discussed with the author that we've put together, whether we need to purchase photo rights for those to be reprinted, or whether they belong to the author themselves, or whether they're reprinted with permission from a certain archive. That's mostly where our illustrations come from.
Yeah, we have a map maker who's a freelancer that, as needed, but nobody on staff. Yeah.
You mentioned earlier the controversy between Hachette and Amazon, and I wondered how your own relationship with Amazon is, if that affects you, or do you perceive anything?
I mean, as an independent, Amazon is in some senses a great equalizer. When we first started the company, it was difficult to get into Barnes & Noble, to get kind of the large buys and the large laydowns, and Amazon obviously doesn't care about any of that. They will buy whatever they can sell. So that was very nice. We never had to worry about that. And they are definitely the most powerful retailer, especially for ebooks. We can see how promotions that we do with them sell, 10,000 copies of an ebook in a single day. As far as how having such a mass retailer has affected independent books, other large retail chains, that has been difficult. And to lose independent bookstores is to lose something that's beyond the selling of books. You do lose something about literary culture. So to preserve these bricks and mortar stores is something that I think is very important. And it was hard to see the Department of Justice ruling, because what the big five, the big corporate publishers, are trying to do is to create another platform to buy and sell ebooks that wasn't Amazon, because there is the danger of monopoly. I've read that Amazon actually continues to lose money on every ebook that they sell, because they are trying to discount so much that they want to corner the market share, and then when everybody's beholden to them, then they can charge whatever they want. It's that's how monopolies work. We will always continue to work with Amazon, and our sales team just did a big negotiation with them as far as contracts and discounting and price modeling. So our personal relationship with them is very happy and constructive, but they have their agenda and we have ours, so it's always kind of a working process.
I think we're lucky because we are not wholly reliant upon Amazon, that due largely in part to the wonderful people at W.W. Norton. We have a very broad area where we sell books. So we're strong in the library market, we're strong in independent bookstores, and so Amazon is an important part of our business, but it is not the only thing. That's we worked with them on some promotions that they've been hugely successful. The bestseller that we keep on talking about, the Norman Conquest, came about in part because of the Amazon Kindle 100 promotion, where it was discounted and heavily promoted for the month. So that kind of visibility to that many people is unbelievably valuable. But Amazon's pricing policies traditionally have been, to get the customer
the lowest
as the a lifelong customer. So they've done things like incentivizing people to walk into stores and say, this is being sold for less than it is on Amazon, let us know and we'll drop that price. Any of the other ebook companies, if they drop their price, Amazon will drop the price to match it, so that they know that they're not being undercut by somebody. And when you do that enough, you do start to lose money on each of the individual book products, but they're invested in the larger things like having people buy Kindles and having people have Prime memberships and those kinds of things. So again, it'll be interesting to see how everything comes about. I think that the shocking thing about the Hachette Amazon situation presently is that it seems like the first thing that they've done that has really been not advantageous for the customer, not in the customer's benefit, because they've been delaying books and making some things not available. So I think that will kind of change the way that some people think about Amazon when their experience as a consumer is being impacted.
And I think as publishers, and this draws me to your music industry parallel a little bit, and the music industry kind of got caught by the Napster and the piracy thing by surprise, but our primary duty as publishers is to preserve our content and to preserve the author's intellectual property. There was some guy from Google who was like, well, I think books should just be free. I was like, no, they should not be free. there's the whole issue of intellectual property. Somebody wrote this, you have to pay for that. That's a copyright, that's what that means. And that's where I think the music industry got in trouble, was this piracy issue. People just one day thought that now I'm entitled to free music, I don't have to pay for that anymore. It's like, would you steal a record? Would you steal a book? You're stealing someone's intellectual property. So I think, as the price point kind of keeps getting diminished, you kind of lose the value of that intellectual property. And I think publishers really want to preserve that, in addition to the fact that an ebook is a product. There's design work and digitization, and I think if you saw kind of an amateur ebook, you would know instantly. It wouldn't load properly, everything would be wrong and misformatted, and it would look amateur. So there is work and design that goes into creating a quality e-product.
But that, as Parnell had said, he said, the book doesn't exist.
Yeah.
It's just an ebook. I think that, Amazon kind of stamped that books are valued at $9.99 and lower. And people don't understand why, a book would be $12.99 or $13.99, saying, well, you're not shipping it. What does this cost you as a publisher? But it costs an advance. It costs all of those lovely people who are doing copy editing and doing proofreading. It's the cover. It's, all that kind of stuff that goes into it.
The publicist that made sure you even knew about the book to begin with. So it's preserving our content is kind of the new challenge of the digital age. Every time we see a book pirated, Ira sends a very kind of strongly worded takedown notice immediately, stop pirating our books. So it's brave new world.
I was going to say, I just wanted to interject here. I don't want to put either Bill or Parnell on the spot, but I wondered if they might want to read a short extract from their books. You don't have to, but if you would be, I think it would be very nice for us to get a flavor.
A 1-minute thing, how's that? Is that good?
That's great. And Parnell, will you?
This is a Detroit story, so there's going to be cars in it, and music, and in this case, a little bit of violence as well. It's a murder story I mentioned earlier, the Vic number 43. It's there's a white cop named Frank Doyle who's trying to find the last unsolved murder, to solve the last unsolved murder from the riot the previous summer. And that was the 43rd victim. His father died after working years and years and years at the Rouge plant, Henry Ford's great empire in Detroit. And one day Doyle is driving down to inspect a very vital piece of evidence in the case, an old 54 Buick, much like the one I used to drive. And he's going down to look at this car, and he's thinking, oh man, maybe we're off here. Maybe I'm barking up the wrong tree. This evidence is not going to be what we're looking for. So he's having some gloomy thoughts. He comes down the expressway, he looks up, and he sees the Rouge plant. I'll just read you this one paragraph. Doyle was rescued from these gloomy thoughts by the sight of Ford's River Rouge complex looming on his right. The 6 slender silver stacks were belching smoke at the heavens, and Doyle could see a freighter offloading iron ore, sending up an orange cloud that drifted off to the south like a fallout. It was a blasted world, rusty silos, mountain ranges of coal and slag, spurts of fire, conveyor belts and railroad tracks, all of it coated with ash and bisected by a river as green as a lizard. The sight could not have been any more personal to Doyle. This was the monster that killed his father, and yet it was so vast and so faceless, so inhuman, that it had always been an abstraction to him. It filled him with conflicting emotions he could not begin to untangle: awe, terror, rage, and a kind of perverse civic pride. This place was the essence of Detroit, what the city stood for and what it did. And as much as Doyle loathed it, he could not deny that he felt humbled and amazed every time he saw it. I think every Detroiter feels a lot about the city that way. It's a place that has a tremendous pull on people who grew up there, especially back in the good days. So that was just my little snapshot as he was driving on the investor. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Stanley Hastings has 3 foils. His wife, the negligence lawyer that he works for, and a cop named McAuliffe, whom he is often dealing with in one way or another, either being arrested or just asking advice. This chapter. McAuliffe seemed genuinely confused. What do you think you're doing? What do you mean? Never mind that you're not getting anywhere. I can't even figure out where you're trying to get. I'm trying to find the connection. What connection? Exactly. I'm trying to find any connection. There are two women in the case, Jersey Girl and the widow. I figure one of them's involved with Tony Gallo. I figure if I put a little pressure on her, she'll go there. I pressured Jersey Girl, the cops pick me up. So I figure it's the widow. I pressure the widow. She goes straight to the cops. Now I don't know what to think. If they're both clean, I'm nowhere. You think only good guys go to the cops? I think killers are unlikely to appeal to the cops for help. What does Richard think of your theory? Richard's got a theory of his own. Oh, what's that? I gave him Richard's "the police station must be on her way to somewhere else or she wouldn't have phoned" theory. McAuliffe nodded approvingly. For a negligence lawyer, the guy's got a clear mind. You have a low opinion of negligence lawyers. Doesn't everyone? McAuliffe considered the situation. So, if I understand you correctly, you're trying to find out who's having an affair with Tony Gallo. You follow Jersey Girl to see if she goes there, but she doesn't. She turns you into the cops. You follow the widow to see if she goes there, but she doesn't. She goes to the cops. Do you by any chance see the error of your ways? What do you mean? If you want to see who's having an affair with Tony Gallo, don't follow every girl in the world and see if she goes there. Follow Tony Gallo.
Okay, I think this would be an appropriate point to conclude the discussion tonight. It's been absolutely fantastic, and I mean, what testimony from the two authors about what a fine press Pegasus Books is, a really remarkable and such a success story. I'm going to suggest that any questions you have, I hope you'll be able to stay for our wine and cheese reception and have you ask them informally. I want to thank you all so much for coming this evening, and I just also before thanking our panelists, I want to mention that in 2 weeks' time we're going to have a similar panel, but a different independent press. And it's so interesting because I was speaking to Claiborne, the publisher, just before the program started, and it turns out the publisher, whose name is Kent Carroll of Europa Editions, was actually someone Claiborne considers to be a mentor. They publish, again, wonderful books. They have focused on the best of American and British voices and represent international literature across the world. So I want to mention that 2 weeks today. But back to this evening, I want to thank you so much for your eloquent presentation, and we would like to make a presentation to all of you. So, we have a citation in recognition, our 200-year-old lecture series we would like to, so we're going to start off with you, Jessica, and it also includes General Society Library membership, so we hope you'll be back. Thank you. And this, by the way, is Meg Stanton, our program assistant, who's going to be doing the presentations. And next, we're going to make a presentation to Iris.
Thank you. How lovely.
Yeah, so we hope we will see many representatives from Pegasus Books and its authors in our library.
I was always wondering how you got in here, so this is perfect. Now I know.
And to Parnell, thank you very much.
I really don't deserve this award, but I would like to thank my editor, my agent, all the little people.
That's sweet. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Fantastic. Again, I would like to thank the four of you so much for giving such, truly a behind-the-scenes look at independent publishing. And, independent publishers are so important because with, I don't know how many, there's 6 multinational conglomerates, Amazon. If it wasn't for the independent presses, these independent voices, these fine voices would not be heard. So could we have one huge round of applause for Pegasus Books and independent publishing? So again, thank you for coming this evening, and please join us now for some wine and cheese. Thank you.